Four, three, two, one. Hello, YouTube, and welcome all who are watching. I'm Jesse Tovar, and this is My Place Cafe Poetry Night. My Place Cafe in Pasadena, California is known for their live poetry, prose, and art nights. I am excited to have organized an event series with My Place Cafe owner, LaTanya Smith. My Place Cafe is located within Hens Teeth Square, 2057 North Los Robles Avenue, Suite 10, Pasadena, California, at the corner of Woodbury and Los Robles. My Place is open every day from 7:30 a.m. to 2 p.m. Here's a short promo. In anticipation for the very first poetry night, I brought my friend Andrew Liu, tonight's featured poet, the Coffee Beans My Place Cafe brews, coast to coast coffee roasters of Arcadia, California, 2 days after Christmas. Andrew made Vienna coffee and sent me a picture so it can be posted on My Place Cafe's Facebook and Instagram pages. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull up that picture real quick here. Doesn't it look nice? It was awesome when I tried it. And then I know him and Annie have been making stuff like this all like the last 9 months or so. And the few times that I've gone over, I've been happy to try, whatever they were making. So it was awesome for that. Speaking of Andrew Liu, his poetry is concerned with what relaying and concretizing the imaginary world, which at times collides with the real physical world. His poems that retell Greek myths, which some appear in California metaphysics, his poetry collection for the MFA in poetry program at Cal State Long Beach, are most memorable to me because these are the poems of Andrew's that I was introduced to. These poems persuaded me to appreciate Anne Carson's Greek myth retellings and her poetry. His focus on Eve, for instance, directs me to early 16th and 17th century British poetry, which I've also learned to appreciate. I'm also ecstatic that we have written prose together where our short story was used for Evan Kendall's freshman composition 2 class, and I'm thrilled that our flash fiction piece is in the Penny newspaper. Tonight, it is my pleasure to welcome Andrew Liu.
Thank you, Jesse, for that introduction. A round of applause, please, for all his hard work organizing this event. And also, let's not forget LaTanya Smith, owner of the wonderful My Place Cafe, for graciously hosting us. Now, without further ado, welcome to the reading. My name is Andrew Liu, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm a recent graduate of CSU Long Beach's MFA Poetry program. What I have for you this evening is a program consisting of poems I wrote during my MFA. These poems are from a collection I used for my thesis called California Metaphysics. Some of you might be wondering why I named it that, and honestly, it's not that interesting. All my life, I've wished I could be like Harry Potter and be whisked off into another magical world. Growing up and having to come to terms with that separation between dreams and reality has made me realize that both the real and the unreal are more connected than we realize. The title is an attempt to face both the reality of my home, California, and the nature of reality itself. Therefore, for a place like Southern California with its monikers of the Golden Coast and Hollywood, LA as the city of dreams, the name of California itself becomes a liminal space between dream and reality. So I thought, what better way to face my own obsession with that divide between dreams and reality than with a title that eschews the culturalist wasteland stereotype and instead claims with that overly elevated term, metaphysics, a specifically Californian brand of emotional philosophy. Although I borrow the term metaphysics from the ancient Greek philosophers, these poems are not actually all that concerned with philosophy proper. You can read them that way. I've made these poems quite expansive, but My goal with these poems was always to explore the feeling and experience of being, rather than to construct an ontological theory about it. I hope you enjoy. This first poem is about Lucifer, and believe me, I know how Lucifer is a seriously overplayed and overwritten character. What with the existence of Lucifer on Netflix and Paradise Lost, not to mention numerous high school poems scattering the web. And indeed, every poem about Satan or Lucifer must contend with that literary giant of Milton. Old, yet blind, yet illuminated by his own genius. But I'd like to try my hand at it anyways, contending with that old genius to see what I can come up with. Lucifer in California. After Carol Frost, Lucifer in Florida. After you left home, I found other ways of remembering you. The lint from your clothes still in the dryer, the heart-shaped lid you nuked in the microwave. Small slivers of nail from a finger or a toe, still clinging to bathroom carpet. Leftover moons trashed on some distant and alien planet after father finished work. A silver gold hair in the shower drain I fingered, winding it like a ring around my ring finger. Your phone. You forgot it while packing just the night before the war. And the spam email in your inbox. In our house's dented mailbox, your friends. Your fault. I still sort your name from our brothers and forward your name on disappointed forms to cancel your subscriptions to motorcycle magazines and pro wrestling. Sorry. I kept up the payments to your car until I needed them for physical therapy. There's more room in the driveway. I don't like it though. I sometimes park and pretend you're sleeping in the back seat, a faint wing of you somehow still smiling, with trash all over the floor, your crushed beer can shining underfoot, next to my knotted grocery bags. For you, a makeshift pillow. How even the air is remembering. A film of dust in this old car. How you wrote shotgun as a moon-sharp smile flashed across your face from a dirty joke you would tell, laughing, kneeing the glove box open on accident. Oh, also, I can't garden anymore. Not without you here. It hurts too much to kneel with my wings as they are, size of Valentine cards and fit to lift little else. I'm flightless still. And I just remembered Michael wheeling me past my unwatered flowers. Pretends he doesn't, but he misses you too. That tree we were hoping for fruit last year somehow died back. A few broken flowers gone hollow, but that's okay. This is just another place where absence has set decay. Don't worry. Come what may, all gardens are dad's in a way. And he would forgive you if you weren't such an idiot. So that was a poem I wrote in my second semester of my MFA program. And I feel like it's one of the strongest ones I've written because it definitely responds to Milton and that sort of overwrought Miltonic language, that super enlightenment, like high diction, high like syntax sort of like sentence. And I wanted to make it as colloquial as possible and to borrow from the sort of like anti-capitalization aesthetics of like Lucille Clifton and whatnot. And I kind of wanted it to seem at first as though the language is shrinking down away from itself in order to give this poem and the speaker of the poem the sense that the speaker is someone who's insecure and who is shy and retiring, someone who is forced to kind of live under the shadow of his brother's absence. And a lot of the motifs in this poem kind of draw from uh, Black Aperture by I forgot his name, but this poet also, the poet of Black Aperture, also wrote about the absence of his brother who committed suicide by gunshot, and his particular treatment of absence, of somebody being addressed who's not there, who is not able to respond. I felt it was particularly sort of inviting with its all these different little items that he would use to signify and show the absence of the person who's being talked about. And a lot of my poems didn't get to where they are until I was able to contend with absence in poems, until I was able to transform what seemed to be these numerous absences in my own life into something more concrete, something more physical. So this next poem, my friend Kelsey once said that listening to it is kind of like listening to 10 overlapping symphonies at once. And I always look fondly back at that comment as proof of how far I've come in my use of sound devices. And I hope that some of that fondness translates over to your enjoyment as well. Medea negotiates with wind. Ice blooms lazily, across the dead face of a hollow astronaut. Medea pulls her sallow witch's dress around her, clumsily. High wind howling, bitter is her bone with chill, with the kill of the morning's breakfast, rabbit, boar, deer, wild oxen. A dead astronaut, and across his hollow face, ice blooms lacily. Bright September in frost across the face of a window. Pain flares through her body, expansive sky, a shroud of black treadmills, each flare a bullet, a kinesis, a firing squad comprising / compromising light. And then the night, at last herself, sharing in emptiness, an emptied sky. Across an astronaut's hollow face, ice blooms lazily. The wind writes out a name, but she has replaced those names with months, with the number of years, with the suspended needle, numbers half fluid, half forgot. 2 faces, childishly she runs from what fear faces. In water, 2 faces in every drop, the action of unforgetting, the process of half remembering. With days spent dazed in her ear, she whispers Colchian lullabies, the habit of motherhood, none undone by blood. Oh, but hands shake. The ears haunt with their open mouths. Such songs are sung more for herself, her serfs. Unwind wool. A loom pulls her eye on the red of the thread. And then, unfed, servants pour slop in the trough for the 2 twin dragons. Everyone thinks she rode off into night sky to a palace, some jet black obsidian tower. No. Oh no. If she could remember how to stroke out the fine detailing of French velvet with a limb of charcoal, she'd count herself lucky. In the wintered field where ice blooms lazily, dead astronauts shatter their own faces with gloves soaked in salt-stunned dew. And as if it mattered, she no longer begs for a beginning, sorrows over tomorrow, beseeches beech trees, or talks about the way he walked over to her, the way the same name sounds over and over again. Don't bleed. Don't bleed. Ahead, in bed, red boys can eat a girl's heart as easily as plucking a cherry branch from the high head of the king's orchard. Royal blooms for a royal you, whatever. Is true. She was. what she was. She was. In the field of dead astronauts, ice blooms and blooms and blooms. One day she talks against the wind, walking into the woods, a girl in the widow's dress, speaking in the Colchian dialect. Fuck you. Fuck you. She finds the field where he found his way in. Old man in an astronaut suit. The wind there is sharp. Its voice in a minor, shovel in hand, she breaks September ice. She buries an old man she once knew and walks home alone and goes back to her room, holding herself in arms so cold they feel like somebody else. So a lot of my poems deal with this theme of divine forgiveness. And one of the things I'm most proud of in this poem is the subtlety of the ending. Let me tell you, it is hard to get a good ending in a poem. This one I managed to get like weeks after I wrote it. After multiple workshops, I had to like listen and really sort of like see where the poem felt like it should end. And that second to last stanza where Medea buries the old man, who I hope everyone kind of understands implicitly that it's Jason, that felt like the ending of the poem to like so many people. And it wasn't until like I really started listening to the sound quality of the poem and hearing this need for contrast, for diminishing of all that internal tangled sound logic, that the ending of the poem really kind of like shined through. Now, Medea is obviously a figure who's been frequently villainized for her femininity all throughout history. And I wanted to kind of counteract that toxicity, peel back the layers of her myth and try to depict her as humanly possible, which is something that this next poem is also trying to do for a similarly villainized female mythological figure. Night gardening. I can't sleep, so I garden, loosening roots by flashlight, coating weeds with surfactants, pulling tender seed heads off the struggling basil so it doesn't commit its seasonal suicide by childbirth. I'm remembering how you collapsed after the nth child. Upon your return to that patch of waste the garden vanished into, like a desert wanderer fooled by mirage. All Eden ever was a cradle, a lab, a backyard nursery for experimental seeds, a place for God to test your failures and his. Eve, I am mourning for you. Your sons are scattered to the winds. They have eaten their sins. They've built cities that drowned, a tower that collapsed, tongues severed, left hanging. They have broken the sky, betraying every tree they pass. They have built cities on each other's backs. This has been going on for centuries. Dominion over land and sea came down to a price of hurt, and whose hurt was worse? I am tired of giving myself over to what will not end. Cycles eventually sicken me, and if hatred is a season, today it's spring. Eve, I am mourning with you. The garden has been falling apart for millennia. All those apples you ate, in every version of the myth, they proved themselves gone. And the kings that chased the grails, bestowing a life beyond this life, failed. Doctors destroyed smallpox. Alchemists blundered, their veins blackened with mercury and fatal metals, while scientists reinvented lightning into a beast of burden. No god can afford housing in their own pantheon anymore. So if the garden fails, it fails. Eve, It's morning. Let's make potting soil of the body's anguish. Let's get living tattoos to remember what we planted. Let the ivy-like ink swell in waves of leaves to record the various tears that feed our crop of fleur de sel, suspended on the bed of a sun-cracked creek. This skin, this cheek. Eve, tired mother, lost sister, fellow gardener, this is what night gardening is. A way of occupying time by filling it with space. A way of building something atop someone else's ashes. I'm a flicker with love and longing. The tangled threads of dried runners, of branches stunted by cold. These will be of use someday. Even in the dark, I can be productive. Even as the dawn breaks my eyelids and I'm shivering. Not from cold, but because I'm alone, without a hand to hold, I hold myself. It's warm. I'm warm. So yeah, a lot of my poems are dealing with this sort of like mythological divide between reality and fiction. And I feel that in no poem is that better expressed than in this next to last poem, the final one from my MFA program. Orpheus, Underworld, Descent. The truth was this, that fate is powered by the suffering of lovers. He muttered on his wedding day, sun sinking down on heart's horizon. So, heart full of dark wood, dark water, into the earth he descends. In twisting tunnel, in obsidian throat, the souls of the dead rise and swell like a breath, like a forgotten habit. In the throat he once blockaded with grief, the song is a breath as expansive as a sky. Even the notes are like birds lining the trees, the bars, the thread of the field and its horizon. Even though the dead begin to remember, hearing nothing but the length of his breath, he's yet to start singing. Such a song seems made entirely of tragedy. Such a song seems no tragedy at all. It was then they remembered, and the summer descended upon them. Even the memory of the light, the sky melting apart into multichromatic sunsets, colors so wild the eye invents them out of light. Even the memory was enough to dispel their pain, to evaporate their bodies, to burn them alive in the clear blue prison of their minds. Even the guard dog is crying. Even the bare-faced council of judges, even the stones. What once was so unbearable can be found already fallen, resting on shoulders, the surprise of its weight only twin to the burden of each shuddering step towards each note. What is this music? From where does it emerge? Whoever it was who sat on the throne was no longer a god. Whoever it was seated beside him was no longer a widow. Against the ashes of their kingdom, the summer rose on a swell of light. The spring had come to a place impossible where even the winter had learned to die. But here was a song, here was a memory beyond any earthly paradise. Darling, it was your arms encircling me, like a ring of trees, like a chorus of birds, like an altar of sky opening into mountain, so real and complete, even death could not stay unchanged. But death was still a place to inhabit. Eurydice was as pale as a snakeskin sleeve. The ground opened, and she was gone. No bargaining then, no deal between mortal and God, just a price. A head floating in the amber waters. I think that when he looked back, it wasn't because he doubted she was there, but because he'd wondered if he'd ever come to sing like that again. The clouds flowing across the sky, the thousand blazing wild brides. So that was the final poem from my MFA program. And it took me a good 10 years to be able to write something like that. For 10 years, I struggled with this poem off and on, trying to get, just the right words to describe just the right details of the myth. And the Orpheus myth is one that, I've loved ever since I kind of first heard about it, because for me, it kind of epitomized that myth of the resurrection. And far from being the sort of cheesy myth about resurrection, it kind of taps into this really deep and universal sort of feeling about resurrection, how it's in defiance of this sort of cosmic order and how it's sort of fated to end in failure. And yet the myth of Orpheus is essentially a myth about failure and about how love triumphs even in the darkest places, in the darkest times. And if it hadn't been for the recent events of the past summer, I might have ended this reading with that poem. But I feel like even after my MFA program, there is a sort of compulsion to keep writing. And so this last poem is one that is about the George Floyd protests and the murder of that man in the summer of 2020. And for me, it's a sort of personal swan song to what has been a horrendous past year. And so I hope that you find this final poem as cathartic as I do when I read it. The lie that you believed. After Ibram X. Kendi, How to Be an Anti-Racist. I was maybe in the 4th grade when my mother said, "You think Superman is not real." What do you mean he's not real? And she thought I was crying because it's like Santa Claus is not real. I was crying because there was no one coming with enough power to save us. Jeffrey Canada, from documentary Waiting for Superman. Race does not exist. It is based on a lie. The lie is that you are different. The lie is that you are worse. The lie is that your inferiority comes from the heart of you, the center of you, as if your very being, your cells, your genes, your blood, your ontology, were measurably lesser in some make-believe way. The lie is that you believe it. The lie is that you are willing to live with it. The lie is what your cells ignore, duplicating and dividing, multiplying and dying, resurrecting and reviving all the dead of you it took to survive, metabolize into the new of you, completely sure of what it is required of them. You could learn a thing or two from your own body. You wish you had that kind of resilience. You do on the inside of your cheek, in the molecules of your blood, in the metabolic heat of your still living body, in history written on the layered pages of your skin. The brain, the neocortex, the way it stored memories of triumph and trauma alike without prejudice, without discrimination. What have you learned from devouring the dictionary? What have you had to learn living without it? In the language kept from you, in the language you grew, in the garden of the mouth, shackled and blinded, burning to speak, wrought into song. What is it you've forgotten you already have? A lie. It spent all your life burrowing inside you. Hatched from the past, its breeders conspired with its particular selection and insidious design to infest you even before the cradle, even before the womb. Your future was a tomb designed to house you ASAP. Just as you couldn't help being born, the lie was something you couldn't help but believe. Because you need to believe in order for it to hurt. The lie, it dove straight for your tongue the moment it emerged like a maggot devouring mussel, the moment you had a voice, because let's be honest, power comes from the voice and that which it compels. And what could your voice ever compel? Really? I'm asking. Except everything. Housing, attention, education, dignity, job openings, respect, loans with reasonable interest, good credit, a diploma, a GED certificate, the weight of the city on your back, the ground under your feet, the eyes of the nation trained on something other than your skin, your disparity, your otherness, the weight of the entire plantation, its haunted ass history, a split inheritance of trauma, your invented barbarity, the history they burdened you with and have the gall to ignore. What could imagine your voice compel if only you commanded it to? The self of you behind the apartment door, facing away, believing in Superman. You were young. What else could you believe in? Besides the multiplicity of your own pain, the lasting legacy of a self-fulfilling poverty, and the lies that your voice compels nothing, that the self of you is worthless and without power, better locked away behind that apartment door, that Superman is not coming, that Superman was never coming for someone as black as you. That is a lie. What a shame you don't believe it anymore. The system had a good run. The privileges it derived from depriving you of your rights spun its wheels like a good machine, and its many lights and its polluting illusions, the natural output of a mechanism designed to dehumanize, blinded you, maybe, for a good while, left you dazed, left you gagging, but not totalized. You were always above the system that oppressed you, the very blood of you, the very history of you, the ontology of you. It stood as it stands now, above the shit that strove and strives to pull it down. Far from being merely undeserving of pain, you were always more than the disasters they mined from you, the cities of atrocities they carved cliffside into your bones, the seaside animosities they anchored in the oceans of your bleeding. You were always more capable of more than cheap labor and nightly humiliation. You were always better than any scar and every possible deprivation. You don't believe in your night terrors anymore. Raising the next generation of believers trained you out of that bullshit. Fuck self-pity. You have your own respect. The privilege of trusting in someone who's supposed to be broken. You more than earned it. The hero's journey was modeled after you and the point of your self-knowledge. Didn't you get your degree for a reason? That which is Superman is within you. Took you long enough to realize it. The apartment door has been flung open. You greet the child of you with a mighty grin. They're grinning back. They're holding every flower in paradise right in their hands, each and every holy name already dripping from their lips like a triumph, like a schoolyard chant. Maybe I'm just a big dumb fag who loves you. Maybe I'm too heavy with love to really see you. But I don't believe for a second that you marched into the white myth of Eden, took that first bite, and told yourself not to savor it. Go on, admit it. Mouthful of apple juice and knowledge, you smiled richly at their lily white faces.
Andrew, great job, and thank you for reading. This poem that you just read right now is making me think about a statement that the Celtics and the Heat put out on Wednesday regarding their game during the crisis at the Capitol. And the part that stood out to me in their statement was the drastic difference between the way protesters this past spring and summer were treated and the encouragement given to Wednesday's protesters who acted illegally just shows how much more work we have to do. Well, that concludes the very first poetry night for My Place Cafe. Thank you to all who are watching. Thank you, Latanya, and all the baristas at My Place Cafe. My Place Cafe poetry nights are a labor of love. If you're able to donate to Andrew Liu, please Venmo him at Andrew-Liu-34318. I will put that information on the YouTube description. To get in touch with Andrew, you can email him at andrew.liu50@yahoo.com. I will also put that email in the description as well. Next month, Olga Murillo will be reading her prose and poetry at My Place Cafe. Mark your calendars for Friday, February 12th at 8 p.m. We look forward to you watching. Have a great weekend, and remember, make my place your place.